Welcome everyone. We're so glad you're here for this letter to the editor training. In a moment, you are going to hear from Laura Peralta Schulte of our government relations team just how important it is in this moment why we're gathered here to write letters to the editor. But so I am Meg Olson, and I am the Grassroots Mobilization Director here at Network. And I am joined by Sister Eilish McCullough and then Laura Peralta Schulte. All right. During our time together this evening, Laura, as I said, is going to give us a Thriving Communities policy update. We are in dire times, my friends, and we are so glad you're all here tonight to raise your voices. Then Eilish and I are going to talk about how to write a letter to the editor. And we're going to give you a little time to start writing, to start drafting your letter. And then there'll be some time to kind of workshop it in the larger group if you're feeling brave. So, with that, I am going to pass it over to Laura.
Good, Meg. And if you can go to the next slide, that would be awesome. I am so grateful both to see everybody here and frankly to see you in the chat when I look at the diversity of states. I just want to say everybody's necessary. So thank you, thank you, thank you for that. Am I speaking too softly? You said you're getting some feedback, Marianne? Okay, this is going to be recorded and with the slides too. So I just want to start out with a frame that we are obviously coming out of yesterday, living in a very different time frame or a very real time frame on the issue of the debt ceiling. As Secretary Yellen announced that the US government will be unable to pay its bills on or around June 1. And so with that, I want to have a caution because I think I was meeting with a very senior folks at the White House today, and their political director was clear to say, look, the people of America are with us. This is a values proposition, and the people are with us in terms of priorities and in terms of the polling that they're seeing. She also cautioned us not to panic at the disco, and I think what she was trying to say was because we are, it's nerve-wracking. We're in a very nerve-wracking time. We acknowledge it, but no, I think particularly for us, both the spirit is with us and the facts and values are on our side. So it is a time to work, but not a time to panic. And I just really want to say that up front. Yep. So the request that we are getting, and it is kind of where Network has been all along in this Thriving Communities campaign, is that we've got to lead with values. So so folks likely saw that the House passed their Limit, Save, and Growth Act. And that was really a very bad bill from our perspective. But that represented a choice. And I think that's the key that we want to bring to you tonight. When you look at the guts of the bill, what they're basically doing is protecting tax cuts for the wealthy and asking hardworking Americans and the most vulnerable people to pick up the bill. And our argument is, Congress, we can do better. And so strategically, always grounded in our values and in Catholic social teaching, we want to make sure that our job is to show the value of these programs. These programs work. And when you remove these programs, real people living in their communities will be hurt. I would say there's maybe two different angles as you're thinking about writing your op-eds. One is we know the political challenges that many members are facing. And I saw some folks from Ohio and Pennsylvania. For members, particularly up in 24, and for leadership members, Schumer, I saw Mr. McConnell has some of his constituents on the call. The goal is to reinforce the values of these programs. I would say the goal, particularly with your House member, if you happen to be from Long Island or for a place that supported this bill, it's to hold your member accountable. They had the chance not to vote for this bill and they made a choice. Keep going, Meg. And I will put on my timer, because if not, I'm going to be talking way too long at you. So again, in terms of just two baskets of where these cuts are going to take hold. So there are programs that are called discretionary programs. These are programs that the government decides to fund or not fund every year. So in terms of the bill, what the bill does is that it puts a 10-year cap on programs that are discretionary, meaning that, again, Congress can make the choice to do it or not. The caps are based on a formula that would push back funding to FY22 levels. So levels, in the middle of the pandemic. What they also do is to exempt military spending from caps. And there has not been a Congress where I've been paying attention where you don't see higher levels of military spending every Congress from both Democrats and Republicans. What does that do? That means that any dollar you add to the military budget is a decrease to these important programs, and automatically just pegging it to the FY22 budget is a loss of trillions of dollars that benefit health, education, hunger prevention, housing, the protection of the environment, all the programs that are part of our Build a New Agenda that support people and communities. So this is a full 22% cut from current levels which is $556 billion. We have more information we'll share at the end that are very detailed on some of these programs that we're talking about, but we want to just give you a sample, just a flavor. So for example, two areas where there is frankly some sensitivity, particularly when you're talking to Republicans or you are lifting up impacts in red states or in red districts, is programs like WIC. 1.7 million women, infants, and children would lose their nutrition from WIC if this budget moves forward. More than 1 million elderly individuals who are served by the Senior Healthy Meals programs like Meals on Wheels are going to be paying for the deficit. So they're going to lose their programs because that's who's being asked to contribute. Veterans' health is devastated in this budget. And it was really important. We had an action in Washington last week where we had the vets groups with us. And the beauty is that they were talking not only about specific impacts on the veterans' health programs, which is substantial, but as you may know, so many of our veterans suffer from PTSD. So they are major recipients of food. They are major recipients of Medicaid, even outside of the military spending. So again, just examples, we'll have more later. Why don't you go to the next slide? Looking at my time. Another example on the discretionary side, what they can or can't fund either year is housing. Now, there is not a place in America, whether you're in an urban place, in a rural place, in a red state, in a blue state, where we do not have an affordable housing crisis. And so if you look at the HUD programs, you're talking about major cuts to HUD programs. This will impact nearly 1 million households served by rental assistance that will lose their assistance. We can only imagine in this scenario that you'd see a significant spike in homelessness. And remember, it is not only homes and housing that's get impacted by this, but there would be a huge loss of services too. So about 120,000 folks will lose in that way too. Again, the values, we're asking the homeless to pay down our debt. Keep going, Meg. So we go then to, again, not to get too wonky, but you've got programs that Congress can fund every year. And then you've got those programs that Congress must fund. These are called mandatory programs. Think Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP. So I would argue in many ways, the bill is almost dastardly in terms of these changes, because what they're asking for is structural changes to these programs. I just have to say, you can always upspend or downspend a budget over a year. Those are kind of easy changes because it's an annual appropriations program. Once you make structural change, that gets locked in. Many of you on the call probably were very active in the 90s during the welfare reform bill. Recall the structural change to programs like TANF. Devastated those programs and still are in place today. So again, just examples, what we're talking about is 10 million people in Medicaid in the expansion states will lose their health coverage. It also forbids states to exercise flexibility. So if people are not meeting these new requirements, it's not like the state of Massachusetts, for example, can usurp it. They are locked into these programs. So what that will do is be a huge cut to state funding. And I'm not sure how your states are fiscally right now, financially, but when you say a huge burden shift to the states, that often leads to folks having to, get cutback services, or, maybe these underfunded agencies just don't do a big job at trying to get new people on. Again, in the SNAP space, we're talking about more than 10 million people, 1 in 4 SNAP participants, including about 4 million kids, are at risk at leaving food assistance. Eilish, Catherine, Meg, they've told me all what you're telling us here, which is you are already seeing long lines after the recent COVID funds for food have run out. One can only imagine what these cuts do. Meg, I'm gonna go take us to home as quickly as I can. So the structural change is called a work requirement. My friends, we cannot have moderates in either parties think that this is a good idea. And so often when you talk to electeds, even on the Democratic side, you say work, they say sure. You know what I mean? It sounds very reasonable. But it is not about whether or not people are working. Most people who are getting assistance, who can work, do work. This is about missing the email from the Medicaid verifier in the state of Ohio and being dropped off the roll. This is about the gig worker who may do seasonal work and so can't meet whatever the heck requirement is being put upon them at the particular month and then suffers a setback. So you already have work requirements in SNAP. The goal in this bill is to expand them to people ages 50 to 55, a very precarious age for a lot of folks in terms of employment. You already have them in things like HUD. They exist. There are whole new work requirements for Medicaid. We've got to kill those. And remember, most people who can work do work. Barriers like childcare, addiction, you guys could probably tell us what you're seeing in the field. What are people's lived realities? But those are real barriers, and more paperwork going to understaffed state agencies is a recipe for disaster, and we have more information. I think this is my final slide, Megan, then I'm really getting going. So again, this is a contrast in values. The basis of this bill is the following. We are going to protect are the tax cuts for the wealthy. Why do I say this? Because they removed the funding for the IRS. It's focused on two things. One, how do we make sure that people actually get a human being on the other line when you're having a problem with your tax bill? So service. But the second and more important piece of this is really to close the tax gap, which is to say people who owe taxes tend to lawyer up in town so they never have to pay their taxes, and the IRS needs folks to be able to go after that. So CBO estimates that this provision alone adds back $114 billion to the deficit. Why? Because rich people are not paying their fair share. That's my timer, so I'm getting ready to stop. And that is why it actually increases the deficit. If this was really about deficits, my friends, that provision would not be in there. Finally, we already are seeing coming out of the Ways and Means Committee, the Republican effort that will begin in March to provide tax cuts that expired under the Trump bill to the wealthy and corporations. What we've learned is they may be kind of clever. First, I thought they weren't going to pay for it at all, which blows up the deficit, but they are sensitive to that now because they just passed a bill to have struggling people pay. So the pay for that we think is going to be on the table now is the environmental climate pieces, which brings us into the new clean economy. So be wary, we might see them not pay for this at all and not count it because that's what they can do under the rules, or they're going to put the green tax cuts up as a pay for the wealthy and large corporations. Meg, I think that's it for me. I know we have questions at the end. Sorry to take up too much time, and happy to be here.
Thanks so much, Laura. I'm chuckling because, we always bring on our wonderful GR colleague, government relations colleagues, and they give us the gloom and doom. However, we are a people of hope. And we're going to exercise that hope tonight. We're going to exercise our love of neighbor and our ability to exercise our democracy by writing a letter to the editor. So why now? Why letters to the editor in this day and age and this time, right? People ask us all the time because we know with local papers going away and things, are they still important? And yes, they are. They are still the most widely read local content. It's what people flip to in the morning. They go to the opinion section. They want to know what people are talking about. And when you name your member of Congress in your letter to the editor, there is a staffer in that office that is their job. They scan the papers, they get pings on their phone. Oh my gosh, Senator Brown was named in the paper. Holy moly, we have to find that letter to the editor. And we also know that letters to the editors can create movement, because you read an article about the debt ceiling in your paper, you write back, somebody else reads yours and is like, oh my gosh, I'm angry too. And they're gonna write. And maybe you can even organize your friends so that there's a nice ripple effect in your local paper. I know some of our Philly friends have done a good job of that in recent years with their letters to the editor, right? It creates louder and louder voices. And we need to do this right now, as Laura gave us ample reasons for why we need to take action. For me, 10 million, all of us, right? I'm thinking of my Missouri folks, right? We just expanded Medicaid. We're talking about 10 million people in expanded states who are going to lose their access to Medicaid after all the work we've done. Whew, I want to write an LTE in Missouri. All right, Eilish.
Okay. So next up, we're really going to walk through like the practical aspects of getting a letter to the editor published. So the first step you want to do is go to your local paper and look for the rules that they have for submitting a letter to the editor. You can go to their homepage online and just search letter to the editor, which is how I found this. And so the Plain Dealer, Cleveland.com and the Sun newspapers are kind of a family of both print and online journalism. And so there's a few different roles, whether you're submitting for print or whether you're submitting for online. But there's often a form that they'll have you fill out and submit the letter. And it will ask for contact information. And so some of them will even say, like, this is really important for the Cleveland one. It says, like, make sure that you're not submitting this letter anywhere else, that this is unique information for here. So make sure you pay attention to every role that your local paper has. Next slide.
All right. Now going into steps to writing your letter to the editor. First, you want to scan your local paper and see how your local paper has been covering this issue. Now, as Laura told us, just yesterday was when Janet Yellen said that we are going to hit the debt limit by June 1st. So this is going to be everywhere. But read it, look, see how you can respond. What is your hook so that what you're writing about is relevant to the paper?
And then next, as you start to write, you want to start your letter to the editor by stating your qualifications. So in our Thriving Communities Toolkit, we have a sample letter to the editor written, and you can find that on our website. And so the sample says, as a member of Sacred Heart Catholic Church, an 8th grade teacher, a volunteer at Blessed Trinity's Mobile Pantry, I cannot stay silent while Senator Smith supports proposed cuts to our nation's Medicaid, food, and housing programs. That stating your qualifications situates you in your community. Why is it important to you?
And then next, it's time to tell them what you think. And this is a mix of maybe some personal experiences. As Laura said, all of you on the ground, you know what is happening already in your shelters, at the food pantries. And then it's also inserting a few of those facts that we talked about, that Laura shared as well. And of course, you're all going to get these slides, so you'll have some of those numbers in front of you to think about. But really, as Laura said, we really want to make sure that we're showing how these programs have real value to real people. We know that there is so much suffering already in our communities. We know that, kicking more people off of Medicaid or taking away housing vouchers is just going to make things even that, increase human suffering. So tell them what you think. Whoops, sorry.
It's okay. And then next, you're going to end your letter with your legislative ask. So maybe you're calling on your senators to vote against any cut to food assistance, housing, or Medicaid. Or maybe you're writing it and you're targeting one of your representative who already voted for the cuts in the first round of votes. So you want to name that, why did they vote against the people they represent? Call out your representatives, lift up your community. Talk about how this is for a strong social safety net, making your community stronger, and including taxing the rich so they pay what they owe. So the budget and the debt ceiling is not balanced on the backs of those in poverty.
And then finally, sorry, my mouse is so jumpy. Then finally, you want to sign it. Of course, your name. If you are a member of Network, if you're a member of an advocates team, name that, right? Like our New York advocates team. Or if you're, a member of Network Advocates for Catholic Social Justice, definitely name that. Because again, remember, members of Congress read these and they'll recognize Network. Our government relations team with all of our faith partners are up on the Hill every day having these really intense conversations. And so now it's your turn out in the field to be building that same clout. And then, of course, your city or your town or your township, wherever you are, that identifies where you're from.
And then finally, submit it, recheck the guidelines for your paper. And in some areas, you can submit it to multiple papers, just wait about 3 weeks before repeating. And when you submit a letter to the editor to your local paper, make sure you let us know. So you can email us at info@networklobby.org, or you can email me, Meg, and we'll make sure that we can also help track it and lift up your letter to the editor.
All right, so just to review, you want to start with your qualifications, which doesn't mean you have to be the expert on an issue, but it's more who are you, situate yourself within your community. And especially just identifying as a person of faith is definitely a qualification, because that, you are framing it with your moral message, with Catholic social justice. Remember to tell everyone what you think. You might want to focus on one program, you can focus on more than one, but remember, you only have about 200 words. And then you want to close with the legislative ask. And just a reminder, if your House member voted yes on that budget bill last week, you have to hold them accountable. Right?
Yes, Meg, can I jump in here just for a second?
Yes.
And your House member will have another opportunity for a vote in May. So the call is for them to do better, get right, do the right thing. So I keep thinking of a teacher that says, you did wrong, do better. So that would be the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Again, we live in hope. We know that our reps, if they realize how angry people are, right? Remember, we're their boss. We employ them by our vote. And if, especially these freshman reps, if they start to see a lot of noise saying, I am so disappointed in you, they might change their tune a little bit, because they're a little freaked out now. So yeah, close with that ask. And again, if you're lucky and had a House member who did the right thing, now it's time to talk to your senator. It doesn't matter if you think your senator is with us 100% of the time, day in, day out. The Senate is struggling right now, and they need to do the right thing. So cheer them on. Send them that message. Okay? This is not a free pass just because we love our senators. All right. So, we're going to take a look at a sample letter to the editor. This is one that was published by New York Advocate team member Ann Kiefer. Eilish, do you want to walk us through this?
Sure. So the first thing, we are going to look, where did Ann start with her qualifications? And if anyone wants to unmute, you can go ahead and shout it out. If not, I will ask Meg to highlight it for us.
Stating she's a New York Advocate for Network.
Great. Thank you, Alice.
Whoops.
Okay.
Giving away the...
Okay. And then next, Ann lifted up what she thought. This is on the expanded child tax credit. So she's talking about what she thinks about that going on. Meg?
Yep.
Can you highlight that one?
Yep.
Great. So in that kind of second bullet point there, she talks about that. And finally, she closes with her legislative ask, which is also in the second to last paragraph. Okay. And remember, you will get all of these slides again, so you can see everything and go through it as you're writing your LTEs. but now you're going to have about 15 minutes in some small groups to kind of brainstorm together what you might want to lift up, what's really important and where you're living. Maybe start to workshop a letter to the editor. And we will put these kind of 3 points in the chat so you can see them all while you're in your small groups. As people are starting to come back, must have been good conversations. People are not rushing back to the big group. Okay. So as we get going, we are going to ask, is there maybe 2 or 3 brave people in the room who want to kind of talk through what they're going to include in their letter to the editor? Maybe especially if you're going to target one of your senators or one of your representatives to hear what you might be lifting up. Anyone brave enough?
And I'll do.
Okay, Jane.
Okay, well, I'll jump in here.
Okay.
So what I just did very quickly on my phone is I Googled to find out for my county, Monroe County, New York, how many people are receiving SNAP benefits. And so I was able to find some statistics of, in recent years. And so I could use that. I'm a former newspaper journalist here, and I know that we have very limited opportunity now in our local paper to get a letter published, but if I can tie it in with local statistics rather than the national, I have a much better chance of getting it printed. So I'll just throw that out there for everybody else. Google and see what you can find, or call agencies, advocacy groups, and see, even on their websites, they might have statistics that you can then use, and then you just make sure you credit where that statistic came from, because whoever is looking at your letter from the newspaper, they're going to want to know what's the source of that information.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Sarah, did you want to jump in?
Sure. I have been having some audio troubles. Now if I cut out. Okay, great. So 2 folks in my group actually recently wrote letters to representatives with Bread for the World, where we talked about SNAP benefits. So we talked a lot about tying that into our letters to the editor, talking about, what portion of people in our area and our state get SNAP benefits, and what it would look like for hunger and homelessness if SNAP was cut, if rental assistance was cut too.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. We have anyone else? Marie? Oh, you're muted, Marie.
As a lady of charity, we serve women and children up to age 4 in a ministry called Mary's Corner. And I'm just thinking I could target WIC and find out what percentage of people here in my area and our county use WIC benefits, and I could tie that into our ministry. So that's something I just thought about.
That is an excellent, excellent tie-in.
Yes.
And lifting up what you do, lifting up your ministry, and then connecting it to your area is great.
Your qualification. How many people are gonna have to, say shame on you to their House members? Anybody? Hands? Okay, good. How many people get to push their senators to do the right thing? Other folks? Okay. So good balance in the room. Any questions?
Meg, I think Gail has her hand up.
Oh,
Oh, thank you.
great. Thank you.
Hi. I would just like to talk about a couple points my group came up with, some observations we made, and some of the things we thought maybe focusing on one particular, or perhaps a couple issues rather than all of them, and especially those that seem really relevant to our communities, as mentioned by the people before me here in this gathering. So to make it really relevant to your particular area, so that we have to find a way to really touch people's hearts. And we talked a lot about the veterans. We focused on veterans issues because that seems to cross all kinds of stratifications, the importance of respect for veterans and what they might have to endure if those programs are gutted. So we did talk a little bit about veterans in particular. And then one of our members talked about find the place where we see what is in our own best interest and in the best interest of our neighbors. So to see it as something really that we are personally, can make a personal difference to us and to the people that we know. So again, that local kind of focus and that personal connection. So even though initially I wanted to reference all the discretionary programs and everything like that, I'm not sure if all of those programs should be focused on, but maybe one or two that really might, inspire someone to also communicate with their elected officials. So my group was really good about identifying those ways of hitting home.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. We definitely want to appeal to people's hearts as much as the statistics in this. So giving it that personal touch, Gail, is really important. So thank you. Great group. Wow, so much wisdom. Sister Danielle.
Yep. Oh, there you go.
I'm concerned. I would not tie the gutting of programs to the debt ceiling. I think that debt ceiling is it really connected that much to continuing to run the programs, or is it a red herring that gets thrown out there to scare people that we're going to run out of money, and so you better cut these programs? Is there really that much of a connection?
Can I just say, you are music to my ears, and I may have buried the lead, Sister Danielle. So we are still looking for a clean debt ceiling. That we are really bumping up to the point where we cannot pay our bills. So that is real. But just like that's what happened in the Trump administration 3 times, this should just be pro forma. And if we really want to have a conversation about deficits, because programs should be paid for, and we want to be fiscally responsible, that's when you hit it with there are lots of ways to do it, one of which is to make sure people who owe taxes actually pay. The tax issue, I just need to say from a polling standpoint, that making sure that people pay their fair share polls higher for Republicans than it does Democrats. Right. So it is, nobody likes the idea that, Elon Musk and, Mr. Bezos aren't paying what they owe. So you're exactly right. We're still looking for this. This should go automatically. And if there's a discussion, then let's talk about fairness and justice.
Right.
Thank you, Laura. Anne.
I had a question about shaming my representative, but not so much the shaming part. That won't be so hard, but the second chance part. And I think that's knowing about how the sausage is made, and what exactly will the process be that will get them that second chance, and a little bit of language, a sentence or two, how that works, how that could be framed. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I think my suggestion would be if you can talk about the impact of the bill, and then say we know negotiations are full on now. We need you to fill in the blank. You know what I mean? There's the process. I don't want to lose you into the weedy process, but we are going to try to shake that thing free. It's called a discharge position, but shake it free around May 16th. So that's more of a political signal for them to do the right thing. So that's maybe, I'm sorry if I went too much DC wonk, but there will be a process where they're going to have to show their cards, and they can do better because it's going to hurt their people.
Yeah. And something Laura said to me very early on, if you remember, you said to me, Laura, this is not the last vote. They will vote on this again. So just being very clear, I think that would be really strong in an LTE, right? This is not the last vote. Vote better next time, right?
Right.
So.
Barbara.
Okay, my comment is that maybe this making the letter too long, but that we don't look at the consequences of these kinds of cuts in a structural way. And yes, the churches will keep their pantries open. The shelters will keep their shelters open. The Salvation Army and all these other groups that have shelters. But what about the long-term consequences of this kind of lifestyle for the poor? And again, a lot of these children, these kids are turning to gangs and et cetera, et cetera. The schools are not helping them as well. They're hungry when they go to school. Maybe their school lunch program has been cut back, so it's really not that nutritious. So looking at, putting in something about that what is this going to lead to? The example of the veterans, who's going to want to be a veteran when they have their health care cut back? If and when they get back from their time of service. So these are the kinds of things, looking ahead. We all love the veterans. Oh, they're wonderful, and we salute. But do we know or care that their health care is going to be cut back? Their mental health.
I think I can start with a quick response to that and then maybe turn it over to Laura or Meg. I think in terms of the veterans, it's what Laura put in the chat about, Republicans, that is an issue that Republicans care about.
Yeah.
And they're sensitive to that, in terms of Medicaid, in terms of mental health, in terms, across the board. That is something. In terms of what you were talking about with kids and childcare, we know we don't need a study to show us that, if kids don't have a stable home, their ability to focus in school is less. If they don't have food, if school, their families don't have access to food, it affects everything. And that trauma is going to live with them throughout their lives. And that it's a systemic injustice, but we're also then putting the fix onto the food pantries and the shelters who cannot sustain the work long-term at all. And we're saying that, the food pantry has to come up with the creative solution or the fundraising to feed everyone and not the government, which is not right.
At least I would just want to echo that. So we're doing a lot of work with Catholic Charities, and I don't know if folks are here from Catholic Charities, but they always talk about partnership. So much of this is partnership between the federal government and agencies. And as Eileen is saying, you can't. We need a dance partner that's gonna be in it for the long haul, and we can't fundraise our way out of this. So that if you're looking for the faith community pick up the slack, that may or may not happen.
That's right. Good.
And I think we'll do a last question with Mary and then wrap up.
Yeah, I was wondering if the SNAP benefits come out of the Farm Bill, or are they talking about that in the bill they just passed?
Can I take that in a 1 minute headline? So
Yeah.
if we need, so the frame is, if you want to do something to SNAP, the Farm Bill is the right place to do it.
Right.
So they're cheating a little bit, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to get the cut up front in the context of this negotiation and then just feed it into the Farm Bill. So from a process standpoint, this is something that the ag committees are doing all kinds of hearings and all kinds of work on to determine what our food programs should look like. It's very inappropriate for Congress to shortcut that process by making cuts in the context of what Sister Danielle said is a false emergency, a false emergency.
Great, thanks.
Well, I think that about wraps it up. Meg, I don't know if you have anything to add before we close up. Okay.
No, I'm just so excited about all the people who joined us and all the wisdom that I've been hearing in this room. And we have good representation on who we're holding accountable, and here we're giving a little nudge to. So go forth. Right. If you have any questions in your process, you can follow up with your network organizers. And yeah, let's make sure we get some published. We had great, at the end of last year, we had our highest rate for our child tax credit. So very high hopes for our budget, our immoral budget LTEs. So thanks so much for joining us.
And we will send out the recording and the slides, and a link to the toolkit again too, I think, to lift that up, as well as emails to reach out when you submit your LTE or if you have questions.
And especially if it gets published.
Yes.
So, all right. Have a good night, everyone. Take care.
Thank you all. Thank you very much for
Thank you,
doing this.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Jackson,
Thank you,
good to
everyone.
see you.
Thank you.
Good night, y'all.
Night.
Bye-bye.